fixed budget, it means that, coming back to these three variables, time, cost, and quality, you have to adjust the time and the quality so it fits with the amount of money that you have available. So, for example, if you have a limited budget, you might not be in a position to do a project at all. You find that out during the appraisal. Or you might have to compromise on the quality of the materials or the overall standard. Or you have to decrease the project duration if that is possible, because that might reduce some other costs, as, for example, finance costs. You might also want to look for projects that fit your budget from the outset, because you might see really, really exciting opportunities, but if they don't fit your budget, you basically lose a lot of time going through this whole process, and then it's just better to walk away after the appraisal and look for another project that fits your budget, because in the end it's just a numbers game. So coming to the more practical things, how would one start to create a project plan? So very simple, you first look at your cost types. This is, for example, professional fees, solicitor, planning consultant, agents, architects, project managers, surveyors, party wall surveyor, and so on. So this is the professional fees. That's one type of cost. Then, of course, you have the build cost, which is split into labor, material, demolition, waste removal, all these things. Then you have costs that come from the community infrastructure levy or section 106. You can't really do much about this. This is normally a fixed cost. Then you have your finance cost if you borrow money for your project. And the marketing cost, which is if you, for example, build to sell, then you have to factor in the money that you have to pay to the agent to sell the units, or for your marketing costs, because you might want to start doing off-plan marketing, or if you rent out, you need nice pictures or, videos and things like that. Or there might be other cost types which you might not be aware of initially, but if the more you speak to all the stakeholders involved, the more this will come out, and then you add it to the plan. And of course, you always include cost contingency, and I would say that's at least a minimum of 10% on the variable costs. The variable costs are, for example, build cost, mainly build costs, because the professional fees, you normally agree them from the start. If you have a new build, 10% will do. If you have a conversion or a large refurbishment, I would potentially increase the contingency, because it's more risky to do that. So you start with that high-level structure, and then you just break it down into smaller details and cost positions. Yeah, that was it. I hope I stayed within the 20 minutes.
Beautiful. Right in time, and plenty of questions. I have at least a few, so we will keep.
How do I to stop presenting? I don't know how to do that. Hold on.
Maybe the green button at the bottom, or no, on the top it will say stop. The red line right in the middle of your screen.
There it is. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Cool.
Very good. Super interesting. Wow, I can see how you can talk about this for hours. Sorry to only give you 20 minutes, Claudia.
I can talk about that for ages. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting, really interesting. We'll come back with questions.
Okay.
Laura, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Yay.
Let me share my screen.
Amazing.
Okay. You should be able to just see the presentation the way it should be, correct?
Yeah, I see everything.
Great. Oh, awesome. Hi, everybody. This is a presentation I've decided to put together for you guys. Thank you, Carolina, for inviting me to put this together. It's very much about what I've learned in project management in this construction industry, and just a few things that I'd love to share with you guys that I've learned. Not all of it the easy way, got to be honest, but I thought there's definitely things that you can take home from this. So a little bit about me. So hello, I'm Laura. I'm a property developer here based in London. Riverlight Development is my own company, and I typically do small independent projects there, planning gains, with my husband's architecture company, which is the one there in the black logo there at the bottom, MCL Architecture. I'm also a director at the development wing of Century Spaces, so Century Spaces Developments with Thomas Esquebec. So we typically look at projects 30 units plus. That's part of our modelling at the moment. I also am a project manager. I project manage my own projects. I project manage projects with my husband's company, and I also project manage and have project managed for other developers as well. I also do due diligence consulting a little bit. People seem to talk to me an awful lot about due diligence. I do like a good old spreadsheet, and I have a little bit of a trust nobody radar. So due diligence is something I do quite enjoy. I'm also the co-host of the London Real Estate Meet with Property Fortress with John Corey. So that is a monthly meeting where we talk all things property. I also every so often write for Property Investor News, and I'll have an article coming out in the next magazine in July with Developers Boardroom and Trusted Land. And I'm also the fastest speaker in the property sector. That's kind of pretty much the best achievement I have on that list. So I'm going to do my best to not go too quickly.
Well done here for us.
I mean, come on, it is what it is, lads. My veneer of professionalism drops very quickly the minute I start getting excited. So, may as well lead with that one. So what I kind of wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, and Claudia has actually touched on some of these. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what you raised a little bit as well, Claudia. I hope you don't mind. But what I've learned about project management is scope. Now, what is scope? You need to be able to agree the scope of work, which is all of the bits of the job that you need to get done. Claudia mentioned there in terms of all of the planning that you need to do in the beginning. This is quite a lot of work that people don't always think about in terms of the scope. So they go, I want to go and do a refurbishment of this apartment. And they might say, I want you to make it look like one of my other projects, or you've seen potentially the contractor's work before, and you go, I want it to look like this. And you agree a fee and you go, brilliant. And you crack on and off you go. Now, there's so many things that can go wrong in that when you have not actually line by line by line. I want windows with white frames. I want all of my sockets to be chrome and also have USB ports in them. I want my door handles to not be this type of one. Whatever it might be, you need to be very clear about what that scope of works is. And that's for whatever contractor or whatever professional that you work with. That's for me, literally the single most important thing that can go wrong is not actually having the scope of work. And agreeing a payment schedule, because when you're going to have these conversations about scopes of works and you get quotes for things, they will often slide in some payment terms that the contractor may or the professional may need, and you need to understand that, and you need to be able to make sure that you can agree to that when you move forward through your next contracting phase or how you proceed the project. So why is scope kind of important? Well, what's the impact of not having a detailed scope? And Claudia exactly hit on this, is that you can get higher costs than projected. You often can see in some of the quotes that you might get on a scope that it might say, there's a problem with this wall, so we'll make something good. Or you might see something like, we're going to just go and we're going to repaint everything. It's going to look great. But actually you wanted some insulation in there because you realized it was cold, and you assumed that they were going to put insulation in if they took the plastering down. So it's all of these things and making sure that what you want is what you're going to get. It can also add delays to the timelines. I've had this where the scope wasn't incredibly clear. And therefore, when we had to go and retrofit something because we didn't think that we needed to do that, it added on to the time of the project. So already now we're delayed and nobody's happy. And not having a scope of work when you have to manage all of the things that happen because of that, it can really sour the relationship between the client, the contractor, or the professional, or whoever is in that chain, because they're kind of like, why, you didn't ask me to do this, but we have an agreement, and it makes things a lot more difficult to manage. So the scope is such an important thing to spend time on. So a little tip that I kind of wanted to add in here is to be as specific as possible with your scope. If you have a color palette that you want to work well, go through that with the people. If you have a particular way you want your development or you're getting planning drawings and that done, and you go, no, I really want this type of feel to my project, show them typology, show them images of what you want them to do. If you know exactly what you want, you have much more control over your project. The second point there is to understand your own cash flow commitments and the terms that you can work to, because often we can kind of throw out quotes from a number of different professionals, and we get them back, and we don't really think about the payment terms. We just kind of look at the number that they came in at, and we might think a little bit about what they can do, but the terms can be really, really important, because that can sometimes trip you up, especially if they want cash up front. So that's a little bit about scope. So the next thing is trust. So there's a nice little quote here. So trust no one is my MO. I was going to put up a little image of like Mulder from the X-Files, and I thought that might be a little bit too far. But my approach to this is trust. So you trust no one unless they have a strong referral and they will sign an industry standard contract. I have my eye on the presentation here, but just kind of almost by a little show of hands, or if anybody wants to put something in the chat, how many times have they kind of had a refer or heard of somebody who said, I've got a great project manager, I've got a great contractor, I've got a great architect, I've got a great whatever. And you go, oh, that's brilliant. And you trust that referral so much. And then you meet them, you really have a great experience with them. And then you shake hands and then you crack on. Anybody heard of that before? I trust the referral. I trust this person because you told me that they're really good. And then therefore I just shook their hand and cracked on, and we went on and did our work. Happens an awful lot. It happens a lot in what I've seen. The strong referral is brilliant. It helps you navigate finding the right people, but you still have to do your due diligence on that person, and you still have to make sure that they will sign an industry standard contract. So why is that important? Well, you want to foster a great relationship with the team, and trust goes both ways. So we can say it from the point of view as a project that, you know, we want to make sure that you're legit, that you're a strong contractor, or you're a strong professional. I want to have a great contract with you, so you can't, you know, do something to me, or you can't steal money from me, or you can't take advantage of me. But that trust actually goes both ways. It's making sure that they also have the confidence that you will pay them on time, that you do understand the job that you have given to them to do, and that there is an ability to work together. So trust is such a key component of that, and it's not just one-sided. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned about trust. You do need to have an agreement about who is responsible for what. And Claudia touched on this when she talked about knowing your roles. So in all of the planning that Claudia brought you through, thinking about who is in the site manager role that she talked about, the extended managers that we talked about, your role that you talked about. You as a project manager need to have an agreement with whoever you're engaging with, all of your stakeholders, and they need to know who is responsible for what. Are they going to call you when somebody doesn't get paid, or do you want them to call the accounts payable team? Are they going to call the site manager when there's a delay on site? Are they going to tell the project manager who now needs to move the timescales? You need to have that clear line of response, and that trust is a huge part of that. But having the contract that shows what those roles and responsibilities are is a huge key, and that allows that trust and operation between the two, between all of the parties. And the third thing for me is you have very little recourse without a contract. Now, this sounds like it's like, you know, painting by numbers, right? We all kind of know we need to have contracts, and we all know that we need to kind of get strong referrals as we move in here. But that trust can be broken so quickly. And, you know, I've had examples of projects I've been on before where I'm trying to be mindful of what I'm saying here, but, you know, we've had to remove contractors from site because we've not been able to trust them anymore. That's absolute, you know, relationship breakdown. Nobody wants to get that far in a dispute. So you have very little resource. If you haven't got a contract, you can't claw them back. You've nothing to go with. That's the worst situation to be in. So 2 top tips is to do your due diligence on everyone that you're going to work with. This isn't to say that everybody, like, trust no one is actually not a fun place to live. You do have to have trust, but you can put edges on that trust. You are industry professionals. This is a business. You know, this is kind of simple business sense. Do your due diligence on the people that you work with. Can they do what they say they're going to do? And do they have the ability to sign the contracts that you need them to? And do they understand the scope? And do you understand what you've asked of them? Because that's a massive issue that can crop up later on, and that the contract doesn't always have to be super complicated. This is something that I fell into quite a lot when I began. My background is in healthcare management, so I'm used to running services in the healthcare sector. So in our world, contracts, procedures, and policies is very bog standard, right? You just kind of take one off the shelf, you adjust it, you move forward, and you collect, you bring all the right people together to create that document. In this world, we don't have that. There isn't really an off-the-shelf book. You can go into a JCT framework, you can go into a design and build type framework, but that isn't always relevant per project. So you can have a simplified version of a contract that still stipulates what you're going to do, how much it's going to cost, when it's going to be delivered, who's responsible for what, and how you're going to manage disputes and things like that. So there is still ways that you can build a contract without having to be like, I have to go and get this ginormous 70 billion page document that no one's going to read. Because again, if it's just as long and just as complicated, you in the role of the project manager, you have to administer that contract. Do yourself a favor, will be my point on that. So the third point then would be payment schedules. This was something that this hasn't always been on my radar, because I've always had companies that we had to think about cash. And the challenge with payment schedules is, what happens when I'm not doing any more work until you pay me? I mean, I'd love to do a show of hands. If you're in a room right now, I'd say, how many times have you heard that? I'm pretty sure the majority can put their hands up for that, right? And then the other side of the coin is, well, I'm not paying you until you finish the work. Pretty sure everyone can say they've heard that too. And so what do you do in that situation when you're in you've got a stalemate, right? You can say, okay, well, what's in the contract? Well, we have this relationship of trust. You just never want to get there, right? We have ways of kind of not getting there. So understanding that these situations come up, and not having people like Stewie here asking, where is my money? Is cash flow is king. Now, if we go back to the scope, the first thing I said on scope was, the first thing I said about the scope, now I can't even remember my own presentation, guys. This is great. And the first thing I said about scope was understanding what your payment schedule is when you quote. Because if that contractor, builder, professional says to you, well, actually, no, we work on 7-day payment schedules. You'll pay us 7 days, every 7 days for this project. You've already begun to go work and they've invoiced you, and you're going, no, my lender's not going to give me money for a while. I don't get money. I don't get we're not going to get the first drawdown for another 5 days. You're already on your first week and you are now having a beef with your team. That's the worst case situation to be in. So you need to be able to make sure that, and exactly as Claudia was showing you, all that planning in the beginning and making sure as a project manager, as you're moving to site, that we understand when things are going to be paid, when we're required to make sure all those timelines join up. Now, staged payments is another part of that conversation, and understanding when the contractor or all of the professionals, because you might not just have a contractor, you might have a contractor, you might have an architect, you might have a surveyor, you might have a joiner, you might have, there's 150 billion professionals that are going to be in there, and all of them are going to want to get paid. You and the project manager, you have to understand at every core part what money is due, who is due it, when is it due, and how am I going to pay them, and do I have the money to do that? So understanding all of those phased payments, exactly what Claudia was talking about earlier, and making sure that you get that right is such a key part, because not missing that, it just creates problems. And retention is something on a build contract that I realized that wasn't as well known for everybody, particularly when you're starting out. We don't talk about this until we get to the end of our project. So when you're talking everything about the beginning, no one's telling you about the end. But retention is a way that you can, it's often you get to the end of a project and you get this rub between, right, we're coming to the end of the project, I want my money, I want my money, I want my money, I want my money. And sometimes that relationship, you may or may not have had a good experience throughout it. Sometimes tempers can be frayed. In that retention phase, you can actually be in your contract particularly with a contractor, you could say at the end of the project, we're going to hold 10% of the entire budget back to make sure that we can cover snags, so that we all agree that the project is finally finished. All the gas safety certificates are given to you, all of the snags are completed, and we all agree that this project is completed. And then that money, that retention money, is then paid to the contractor as the final payment. Now, if your contractor doesn't want to end the project for some reason, they've moved on to the next project, the relationship is broken down and you're getting into difficulty, that retention can be used by the developer or the whoever is actually running the project, the project owner, to pick up and finalize whatever else needs to be finalized on that project. That's what that retention is kept for. So it's very something that is important to have and important to know about when you're thinking about payment schedules. So 2 top tips there. Like I said, make sure that the payment schedule, the bill contract schedule, and the lending terms are aligned, so that you don't get into a situation where you are out of sync with getting people paid and having this conversation about dropping tools until I get paid. It's just an absolute nightmare. The other thing is to know what you may need to provide cash up front for materials and things like that. That caught me out. I did all the things that Claudia talked about, built a plan, put it all together. And what caught me out was I didn't realize they were going to need 15 grand to start before the actual lender money came in. So we had to scramble and move things around. We could do it, but that was not a fun day, I can tell you. So payment schedule is a really important thing that I've learned. So don't get caught out, right? It's the whole idea is we don't want to get caught out about things. I actually changed that at one point to oops. That was actually how I'd read that. And it's keep calm and don't get caught out. So what can catch you out? What makes you go, don't? Site security, that caught me out. I was on a project once where as we were going through all the things that we need to think about on site, we had the bill, and I was like, oh, we need to think about perimeter security as we're getting site materials on. Contract went, yeah, no problem. I'll go and handle that. And I went, sweet, great. We got a quote, we got it together, everything's fine. Project went in. Relationship broke down with the builder. Who owns the fences? The builder. Site security is a really important one, because obviously if things go wrong, you still need to be able to control your own site without having to put more money in your pocket to do that. So site security for me, I will never do that again. I will pay that cost of making sure all of the hoarding is that as a project cost rather than give that responsibility to someone else, because that was something that caught me out. So the handover process at the end, that was something as well that was quite surprising to me about how people think about what the end of the project looks like. Now, if you plan that well enough in the scope of your project and in your contract and you do all that in the pre-planning, this process is already created for you. But I didn't realize that not everybody thought the same way about this. That was another fun day, trying to untangle a handover process and get a project actually completed as everybody had expected. And regulatory concerns. So things like insurance. So again, because the wonderful world of learning, if you have a vacant property, your insurance will tell you that you have to have heating on if you have pipes through that house through the winter between this point to this point, to make sure that the pipes don't freeze in a bad frost. And I was like, oops. I had no idea that we were supposed to have kept the heating on. I didn't know anything about that. These are all the little things that, that can kind of trip you up and catch you up. Now, thankfully, there was no need to utilize the insurance policy, but if we had, we would have been void. So things like that, things like building control. Are you very sure when you go into that? And it goes back to the scope. Is there anything in your scope of works that will actually require building control? Are you moving staircases? Have you changed your scope throughout the project and now you have decided to move a staircase? Has anybody realized that you're going to need building control for that? So it's kind of thinking about little bits like that can catch you out. Now, the tip on this is you will never know everything about everything, and be prepared that you will be unprepared for things that will go wrong. That's hard. It's hard for someone like me who likes to plan. Looking at Claudia's planning there, that's exactly, I'm in love with everything that she had up on that screen. I'm like, oh, that's my absolute dream boat. Loads of places, dependencies, plans, trackers, very, very happy. But I didn't know about the insurance, didn't think about building control, didn't think about this, didn't think about that. You are not going to know everything. And that's the part as a project manager that you have to be an operational thinker and you got to be a proactive thinker. And having a senior PM that you can go to with questions can really help manage these issues as you're kind of growing your learning chops. And, I do that now. I have project managers that I will go to with a question that are nothing to do with my site, that they're not employed in the project or anything like that. But if I'm not sure about something, or I have a question, or I had this challenge, or I had this issue, and I want some more support, I will go and get it. And I have that backup, because I'm not a construction project manager or project manager, and I don't know how to lay a wall. I don't know that the screed goes on in this time, in this shape. I can't know all of that. But what I do have a responsibility for is managing everybody else who does, and managing and making sure that I know what I need to know. That's the kind of the focus there, about not getting caught out and just kind of not taking on way too much responsibility onto yourself. And then finally, communication. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I love that quote by George Bernard Shaw there. And Claudia said this as well in relation to the reporting and documentation. One of my kind of phrases is, if it isn't written down, it never happened. That's kind of my little way of life sometimes. And certainly in this context, communication for me, there are so many, I'm going to say it because it's so fresh in my mind and I can see them out my window. I've got building work going on right and left side of me at the moment, and it's something that's bugged me all week. It's been really, really, really very loud, very annoying. We're in pandemic, lockdown, trying to do webinars is difficult when you're getting banging, right? Now, all of that was a communication problem. All of that, you know, if they had told us X, we would have done Y. If they had told them this, they would have done Y, and everything would have been a lot more manageable. And it's the simplest thing. And again and again and again, this conversation about communication and your role as a project manager is a really, really important one. So if there's one piece of advice that you can take from all the words I've just babbled at you all guys there, this is it, is about communication. Not quite the guy shouting at everybody else, but you as a project manager, you have the responsibility to be communicating with every one of the stakeholders of this project. You're the only one who's going to know that project inside out and every facet of it. You're not going to be so concerned with GDVs and projected prices. That's not quite your bag, but you know that none of that can happen if you haven't got this project to the end. So creating a framework for communication to all of your stakeholders is the single biggest thing you can do as a project manager to keep everybody engaged. The last thing you want is people ghosting you, not replying to emails, not replying to calls because you had a beef on site and things have to get done. You will fight on site. You're not all going to agree about everything all the time. And proactive, honest communication is the only tool you have to get everybody back to the table to find a solution to the problem at hand. You have all the contracts. You have in your contracts, you can put in things about how we deal with dispute resolution. If we have a fight about something, what are we going to do? How are we going to actually resolve this? You as a PM have to be able to invoke that. You have to be able to bring that group together. So that proactive and honest and open communication is key to make that a useful exchange. And switch players if you need to. When I mentioned earlier on all the mad things that I'm doing with multiple different businesses, the only reason I can do those things is because I bring in advisors to my team that are way more experienced than I do. So, for example, Richard Little is an advisor is one of my advisors about things. Helen Chorley is another one of our advisors on projects. So we utilize their strengths. Like, so sometimes if you're in a situation where, maybe I'm not the right person to have this conversation. Maybe it is a site manager, or maybe it is this person. Switch your players around. You as project manager can do that. You can move people around to get communication channels back open. So if I can give you a tip there, know the expectation of all of your stakeholders and communicate it decisively. Now, obviously, we're living in a mad world now with the most crazy amounts of uncertainty and fear out there. It's a crazy world out there right now. If you are investing into a project today, you're going to want to be communicated with very frequently from your site managers. You're going to be wanting to be communicated from your developer. You're going to want to communicate with your lenders, knowing their expectations. What is it that they expect from you? Again, be proactive in answering those things. Be proactive in being able to show people what they need to know. And transparency leads to progress. It hurts when things go wrong or you make a mistake, and you have to be open and honest about it. That transparency allows progress. It allows the problem to be resolved. Whereas if you kind of get a bit nervous and you don't want to be open with something, then it makes the cleaning up of that process a lot more harder for you and for everybody on board. So that's kind of those are kind of the 5 huge things that I've learned about project management, and a lot of it's been learned the hard way. Some of it's been learned from others, from listening, watching, observing, and I'm still learning as I continue doing this kind of work now. So that's it. So if you want to reach out, that's my name and email address. I've just put a little graphic up there, just synergistic timing. I'm also, like I said before, I'm the co-host of London Real Estate Meet, and I'm hosting a panel discussion on Tuesday evening on the 7th of June at 7 p.m, a virtual thing, about the new challenges of bringing jobs to site right now. So I've actually got a construction and a very experienced project manager going to do another discussion on this topic, talking about how he's kept sites safe through COVID, how he's managed to, what his plans are for moving sites forward, talking about communication. So this kind of conversation could continue at a higher level with somebody else who's done this a billion times before. We also have Richard Little. He's also going to be there with a developer hat on. And we have Sue Jonas for finance for property developers, all kind of talking about how we get deals on site right now. So yeah, that's me. Thank you so much. And I hope I didn't go over my time.
Thank you, Laura. This was amazing. And we've actually have so many girls here, including you, Claudia, Helen, etc., that met on this meet. And we're seeing your little dog right now.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to unshare my screen and I've got all these buttons in the way.
No worries. So that meet is very good. We've been going there forever, and it's a really great timing to be speaking about the same subject.
Yeah, literally just random enough that that's happened. Sorry, I'm really ruining this group now because I can't unshare my screen. So
let's check if Michelle is ready to speak. You're on mute, Michelle, still.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, and I don't mind the beautiful backdrop of the little puppy.
Oh, I am trying
I'm more than happy with that. I'm more than happy.
I'm going to try and quit the call and come back in on silent. So thank you so much, guys. Sorry for taking that off.
Stay. I'm going to share my screen, and I think that's
okay. That will bunch me out. Thank you.
Yes. And I have Michelle's slide over here. So Michelle, you feel free to talk over it.
Sure. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Right. So, Carolina's got a couple of pictures which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Unfortunately, my laptop died last night, and I had a lovely blue screen as my at the end of my slides. So I'm just going to improvise with and talk about, as Carolina has invited me to, about my past experience and one of my favorite ever roles I ever did in the corporate world. And so here I go. So most of you know me, and on paper I sound very dull. I'm a chartered accountant, and I used to actually be the vice chair of the London branch of the New Zealand Institute of Chartered Accountants. So I think a lot of people would have run away from me if they'd met me over a drink and I'd told them that. I'm also a project manager. I did my Prince 2. I was a practitioner. So when I worked in the corporate world, I moved out of accountancy and more into projects because that was more my thing. A lot of people have said to me, you've been put in a box for 20 years working in the corporate world, but it's made me who I am today. So I worked for a number of banks across many programs and things, bank mergers, integrations, and big finance change projects, risk remediation projects, lots of regulatory and compliance things, IT implementations, and primarily transformation. So I've had a lot of experience working for banks such as NatWest, quite a few different gigs there, RBS and Coots in the private office, big transformation program at HSBC, and I did a lot of things with UBS, probably about 6 different gigs there. So quite a lot of experience over the years. And I did some international consulting also in the Middle East. So I'm not going to sort of like cover too much old ground that we've heard today. I mean, it's fabulous presentations from the girls, but I'm just going to try and talk potentially more about the people side of things and my experience with people in the corporate world on these programs and projects. So, yes, scope obviously has to come up again. Defining scope is absolutely fundamental, and quite often new programs and projects arise, and sometimes a little bit of scope will creep in from somebody else's project which didn't really get finished properly, as happened in my experience. And sometimes banking is not actually as glamorous as it sounds. I used to sometimes refer to some of our banks, not naming any, but I'd call them dinosaurs. Some of their systems are very clunky, and they bring along new things and they say, can you implement this? And it basically just gets chugged on to an old system, and things carry on for years and years. And there's a lot of it's been a lot of I'd say I've not just transformed projects and systems, and it's been a lot of transforming people as well. Some of the disciplines on project management, and with some of the people, I've worked with some brilliant, really, really professional people and program managers, and very high level. A lot of my stakeholders have been MDs and above. But some people, deadlines were optional. I've caught people moving milestones that would overdue, and they'd switch them to green and move them out, and there'd be no change control. So I'd have to sort of like put my foot down about that and just say, that's not acceptable. So optional deadlines, no discipline, and program and project documentation. That all important audit trail that Claudia and Laura talked about. I mean, when a project goes wrong, you've got to have that there to fall back on. And unfortunately, sometimes the role of the project manager is the scapegoat. And a lot of people think it's their safety net that somebody else's head's going to roll. So I've seen some interesting things. I've seen a few bosses not come back after lunch. And it's all about getting clarity on who does what, getting buy-in from your stakeholders, building relationships with them, especially the person who owns that budget. You don't want to fall out with that person, because when things happen, when big things happened, like, for example, 2008, a lot of projects got canned. And if you were working on a mandatory project or program, you were in a better position. So, a lot of people lost their jobs and their roles and things if you're not on something that's critical. So, it's all about prioritizing milestones, identifying the critical ones, and also, having firm baseline plans. So you've got all your documentations, everything's in place, and you can get on with delivering. You've got all your resources signed up and signed. They're all clear on what they're doing. And and just getting on with it and making sure. My big bugbear is also about documentation, people turning up at meetings and they don't have their dates and versions on documents. I mean, you could be looking at a plan that's 2 or 3 weeks old and you're wasting hours. And just being really sharp about documentation, always having an agenda for meetings. I used to get invited to endless meetings, and I'd get back to my desk at 6 o'clock, and that's when I'd start my work for the day. So it's always having an agenda, always having a name assigned to a task and a delivery date. A lot of people I used to find used to scarper out the door saying they had another meeting to go to just because they want to avoid getting something assigned to them. So lots of fun and games, but it's taught me a lot. And obviously the whole stakeholder corporate governance and engagement is very applicable, as you've just heard from the girls. It's vital to get everyone's buy-in, have that frequent communication and transparency. So I'm going to now talk about...
It's a very interesting one, Michelle, because even on larger schemes, I mean, there is so many people that receive the drawing, and it's just finding this right way of making sure that no one uses an old version.
Oh, absolutely. You waste so much time, and it's super frustrating, as I'm sure you wouldn't want to put up with that, I'm sure. So that's one of the disciplines that I am absolutely essential to implement with people, and it's not great. So if I had one job that I could say I loved, it would be a role I did at one of my stints at UBS, and that was working on their biggest flagship community project, which was building the Bridge Academy, which is actually based not far from where I live. And this was going back over 10 years ago. And UBS was the first bank to ever sponsor a city academy. And I was very lucky to be appointed as the project manager. And my role was to get the design signed off. So basically, I was working with UBS, all very senior, passionate managing directors who had full-on day jobs, but they were giving up their time to work on this amazing project. And so I had to make sure that, I wasn't wasting their time when I wanted to see them. And so I was basically interface between them and the design teams, the construction teams, the educational specialists, and getting everyone's input and everyone's passions signed off in this building, but within budget, and obviously trying to also work with people who weren't from the corporate world and getting them to learn how to do things the UBS way. So I was running around probably 12 hours a day for about a year doing this role, but I loved it, and I absolutely loved it. And I think when I walk past it now and I see this amazing building on the canal side and in Hackney, I mean, I just love it, because it's far more exciting than ever having, if someone went back to one of my projects in the city from years and years ago, it would probably just be like an archived file. I mean, this is a building. It's like creating something. And I feel very envious about architects and designers when they have a finished product. So it was incredible, and that building won awards. And I was there for the opening party, and it was just amazing. It was like, I was just thinking, it was just be so privileged to be a child to go to school. There was a big music hall, an amazing gym. I mean, the time and the detail we went down to, about even where the water filters would go in the gym. It was just the most amazing project, and it gave me really whet my appetite for working in property. At that point, I only owned a couple of properties, and so I think that would be the highlight of my sort of project management in the corporate world, and it's one I'll never forget. And I mean, I learned an awful lot, and and just on tools and things, which we used to use Microsoft Projects, which I know still exists today, and I believe it's quite an expensive tool. And even back in the day, a lot of my stakeholders didn't have it, so it was always a good excuse for them not to see the plan. They used to say, I haven't seen the plan, because they didn't have it, software. But that was great. And I know there's a lot of really great tools out now, like Smartsheet, and there's an amazing project tool called Thon, which I believe you're familiar with, Carolina.
Yeah, we're using it. Thanks to Polly.
It's amazing. And really great guys behind that system. I'd highly recommend people to have a look at it. And so obviously I do my own residential projects and things. I've got properties in London, Victorian houses, and it's all, it all really basically comes down to every project. It's all about the due diligence. It's all about, the planning, the budget, delivery, and obviously the communication and managing your stakeholders, and keeping all your documentation, up to scratch, and that audit trail in case you need it. So just finishing off my last little bit that I wanted to say. Sort of in conjunction with my consultancy that I do, I'm currently developing my new brand and creating a new business venture. And so I'm leveraging off my old experience in the city, in accountancy and project management, and my property developing and investing strategies. And I've been investing a lot of time over the years and building great connections. I've actually made a list of all the networks I belong to. It's there's a lot. There's all my accountancy network I'm still involved in, and Developers Boardroom, and SaaS Alliance, and the Sassy Sisters, and obviously the Property Sisters. So I've basically been, especially over lockdown, I've been basically building more relationships with people with shared values and those who I respect and whose work I admire. So I've created a golden book of people that I've been putting names in, and
I love a golden book.
I'm going to be working with these people. So watch the space, more to come.
So what I love about Michelle and the way she operates, and she touched a little bit on it, but I think there is almost like another talk required on it, is engaging people and building those really strong relationships without needing anything in return. And I think we've known each other for probably 4 years, because we saw each other on every single networking event. But I never heard about this experience and, about the accountancy background and project management and doing those big projects. And so you just like bring people together, but you never push your own agenda. So I'm so sorry to put you on the spot and try.
No, honestly, it's fine. It's fine. I'm a little bit, I think my voice was cutting out. I did a PT session this morning when I was trying to sort out my IT, and I forgot to drink some water.
No worries, but it just shows you that like project management is a lot about these, the technical, the setting up everything, like Claudia and Laura were talking about. But there is a really huge part of it, which is people's part, and like it's combining the two of these. So you always have to be the bad cop and a good cop in one. And I don't consider myself a very good project manager. I'm all heads in the clouds. and I need people like the three of you in my life to just pass stuff on to. And I think I've discovered, I've done it because that was my job in a corporate world, product manager, which involved a lot of project management, our program manager for many years. So I've been forced into that space, and I actually don't like it naturally. So now I know that my thing is find people who are so amazing at delivery, like the three of you and many other girls in this group, and then just pass on all the crap I don't want to deal with, because it is probably the most challenging job you can have, to be honest. It's a huge challenge. Okay, so I'm going to open up with the questions, and there is a bunch of cool questions in the chat. Sorry to keep it a bit longer, which is probably also explains my project management skills. But if someone wants to stay another 15 minutes, then we're going to do quick Q&A. Interesting one from Claire Norwood, I think. Difference between project management and employer's agent. Can one of you guys talk about that?
Employer's agent. I'm not quite sure what Claire means by that.
I don't either.
I think she's more kind of talking about if I understand your question correctly, Claire, thinking about your kind of construction setup as well. An employer's agent would typically be the contractor as the main agent delivering the project.
That's right, Laura, because we've got design and build contracts. So is that why the difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, typically, if you're having a design build contract, in my experience, at least anyway, the main contractor is positioned as the one assembling the design team. So they'll bring in the architect, they'll bring in a project manager potentially for that side of the project, or they'll bring in, the structural engineers, whoever they need.
But they're not constantly needing to ask you as the client for the information. They're deciding that in-house, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, for me, it comes back to the scope. And that's where design and build contracts can be your friend or your enemy. If you work with a contractor and you've not been specific with your scope, they're just going to crack on and build what they think you want, which isn't necessarily what you want. So in my experience, that terminology about employer's agent, so thinking with my architecture side now on my husband's side, we would talk about employer's requirements when we talk about spec for the actual, I want this color on the wall, I want this wallpaper, I want this. We would use the terminology of employer's requirements, and that employer is the contractor or the client, depending on the structure. So that's my understanding. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's really helpful. I hadn't quite got it straight in my own mind. So thank you.
BV asked a question that I think I would love to know, because I'm a geek when it comes to numbers. If there is some template or ratios on projects, kind of where you have to get with costs, if there is any good tool or place where we could find this sort of information.
Are you talking about like a status report where you can show with your over budget and what your like top risks and issues are? Like
Vicky, and if you guys want to jump in and ask a question.
Hi, Carolina. Yeah, sorry, it was an old question. I don't know who asked it. Sorry.
Okay. Someone else want to ask.
Eco properties, maybe.
Right.
Yes.
Name.
I don't know if you can hear me. I think it was me.
Yep.
So it was just, you had the main cost types, Claudia, and I was just wondering if there's generally kind of ratios around, okay, the professional fees are usually about 10% and the build cost should be around 40%, etc. And if you had some like templates to show that, or like to make sure you don't miss, as Laura was saying, some of those key elements that you might want to have as a breakdown. Just an example one, obviously each project is different.
Okay, so yeah, I think all these templates that are out there, so everyone wants to give you a deal calculator or their own spreadsheet and so on. They're all good, but in the end, there's no one fits all. I'm sorry, there's no one fits all solution. So in general, the bigger the project gets, in my experience, the higher the percentage of the build cost and the lower the percentage of the professional costs. And if you have a really small project, you still need to pay the architect, for example, which means then the percentage of the professional cost might go up, or also things like SIL or Section 1 or 6 that can vary so much from council to council and area to area. Is I would not want to commit to, you know, a percentage really. I'm sorry, I don't have a more specific response.
No, it's okay. It was just if there was a rule of thumb that existed. If not, then no worries.
I just jump in there, just if it's any, in terms of the appraisal, like I agree with Claudia, it's definitely not a one size fits all. And certainly when we look at the larger projects, when we're thinking about bill costs, we'll typically estimate bill costs based on a pound per square foot basis to get the top line bill costs. But then we add on professional fees as a separate fee to the bill costs, and we use a percentage, typically 10 to 12%, depending on the complexity of the bill costs, as an estimate, like purely another, if I put these numbers in, does this deal stack under this parameter? And then after that, I go to my QS or I go to a contractor and say, okay, look, this deal looks really good. We've stacked it to this thing. Is this realistic? Do we need to adjust? And then we'd start understanding, well, they'd be like, Laura, you need piling and that's going to cost $1 billion more. So that percentage is useless. But again, having the contingency in there that Claudia talked about before, it's making sure that those numbers and how you calculate them are independent kind of each other. So your bill costs are rooted in as X, your professional fees as a gauge, as a percentage of your bill cost, but knowing that isn't necessarily including all of that. Like I wouldn't include like my connection fees to electrical costs in there, for example. That would be still another line item. So there isn't really one size fits all, but there's certainly estimations that you can make as long as you understand what you think goes into those other estimations. So if site cleaning, for example, would you put that in under your professional fees, or would that be a separate bill cost fee? So it's how you look and calculate it. So I think as long as you understand what's in it, then you can take it to somebody else who will tell you what's missing, if that's of any use. That's just as a way to get to the next stage.
Okay, thanks. And I think there's still a couple of really good points in there about kind of site cleaning. I know you already put site security and a couple of the other points, but yeah, just kind of keep ticking those ones over and adding them in.
And do it in your spec, in your scope of works with whoever you're speaking to. Will you do these services? Will you take on this job for me? And then you'll start getting kind of an act like, when we're looking at larger sites, like it's a lot simpler to think about a new build construction project when I don't have to think about what's already there. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of different ways to skin a cat, but certainly as long as you're clear, ask them, will you, what have I missed? And they will love to tell you what. They'll love to give you a list of all the things, extra things that they think that they want to do. And then actually you can take that and put that back together and go, actually, this is what I want now. Cost me on that. And you get a lot more things. So sequence, talk, gauge. And then you can kind of take that when you're comfortable to proceed. You can get formal quotes for things, and they should fit within what you've already estimated.
Cool.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you, Laura. The thing is, sometimes you can even negotiate the professional fees. I did that on a project where I asked some architects to quote and an interior designer to quote, and their quotes were just too high compared to the overall budget that the client had. And I said, well, if you come with your usual like 9% on the build cost fee or whatever, the client is not gonna hire you. So I really managed to negotiate that down. It all has to be in relation, it has to make sense. And yeah, it's negotiating sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because that takes us to another question that's on the chat, is about what's the fee for a project manager? Is it a percentage base? Is it project base? Is it fixed? Because it sounds like you guys can save quite a lot of money if you get involved and solve all the issues. It would be interesting also what the ladies want to know, what's the cost.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And it's just, I don't know how other people do it, but I look at the project in its complexity, and also I look at the risks. If there's a lot of risks involved, then I know already that I will have to do a lot of risk management, a lot of communication, a lot of changes will occur, which means I have to spend more time, and time is money. So I will quote differently on a high risk project than I would do on like a standard easy peasy refurb or something like that. So I can't say really. I don't have a one fit all fee structure.
Yeah.
Laura, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, so when I was project managing for other developers, I would do it on an hourly basis at that time. So I was saying, look, I'll commit X number of hours to this project, and including, travel or wherever the project, because the projects weren't always local to me. On my own projects, I put in a fee into the project for my time and my work as that dedicated project manager role. And that will be a nominal fee. That will, again, it won't be a generous fee, because that's, it's not, I'm not here to make cash out of the work, but I'm here to get paid for the work that I am doing. And that is separate to it is a project cost for me. We need somebody in that role. And I'm a better cost than going to hire somebody else out for that. So that will have a different fee for that. And that will typically be a tolerance. It'll be a nominal hourly fee based on, we want this number of project management hours, and then you get into conversations about overtime, and this is where the project manager has to manage their own budget, which gets a bit unusual. So I think certainly if you're independent and you're looking at sites on your own, pound per hour can be good, but like Claudia said, be very careful with the additional complexity and have that space for, okay, listen, if this is a big issue right now, it's going to take an additional amount of time, or it's outside the scope that you've agreed to work upon, you need to have a framework to either say no or get paid for your extra time. So I think some people will do it as a percentage of bill costs or a percentage of professional fees. And that's when the multiples get quite expensive, I think, for people to accept that cost for project managers. So it's a bit of a balancing act depending on how much, scope there is in a project. Because if it's quite a lean margin, the easiest thing to say is, oh, I'm managing all myself and I won't need a project manager.
Yeah.
And that can cost them more in the long run. So yeah, not the easiest answer, not the easiest one to answer.
But there's one thing that maybe helps. So what I did when I developed my contract is I tried to give definitely a fixed cost for everything, the whole package before the build phase starts. So the whole planning, the preparation and the planning, and that's a fixed fee. So that's basically the end of the planning phase. And then after that, I charge per month or per week, depending on the duration of the project. And that's when I take a risk. I do an estimate and I think, oh, I'm spending 6 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours per week on that project. And then I apply my own hourly rate. If it goes beyond that, the client will still only pay that fee. Then I lose money, but I try to make it as transparent as possible. And you can't really write down every 10 minutes that you work on a project. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Just one more question, because we're already quite a bit out and Ruth is going to kill me in a minute. Interesting one, Claudia, you mentioned in the chat, or maybe not everyone, about the tools that best to use for managing this sort of stuff, rather than the Microsoft projects that Michelle mentioned. Is there anything that would work on smaller projects?
Smartsheet.
Yeah, so go on. I use Smartsheet for all my project. I'm used to MS Project because that is what most corporate organizations use, but it's quite expensive and it's more difficult to include the team, whereas Smartsheet is quite cheap and easy to use, and you can even allocate tasks to your team members and things like that. And and then for the budget, I just use Excel to keep it simple.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so sorry to keep you a bit longer, guys, but I think it's really interesting. And if there are any, I'm gonna send on the WhatsApp group if the information for the girls, so you can all get in touch and ask your own questions. And then maybe there is some follow-up, a couple of weeks or months, we could do like a training or Smartsheets, or if that works for everyone, or we can just release a separate YouTube video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're just going to have a chat on how to more info to this 1 hour, 20-minute presentation. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Speak next
Thanks,
week.
Gary. It's great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.